Welcome, dear ones. There is a person you have met before, maybe at work, maybe in your family, maybe you see them every morning in the mirror. They don't shout, they don't threaten, they don't compete, they simply arrive. And the moment they do, something in the room shifts. Conversations adjust, dominant people go quiet, arrogant people suddenly feel the need to explain themselves to someone who never asked for an explanation. Psychologists have a name for this effect. They call it ambient authority, the measurable change in group behavior triggered by the presence of a single individual who has mastered something most humans never will. Emotional sovereignty. But the people who carry this power, they don't have a certificate, they didn't attend a seminar, they were forged through fire, through silence, through pain that would have destroyed anyone who wasn't built for it. And today, we are going to dissect exactly why the most dangerous person in any room is always the quietest one. Not dangerous like a weapon, dangerous like the truth. Because the truth never screams, it never chases, it never defends itself. It simply waits, and eventually everything false collapses in front of it. If you have ever been told you are too quiet, too calm, or too unbothered, this video was written for you. Stay with me.
Their silence is not emptiness, it's loaded. There is a critical misunderstanding the world makes about quiet people. It assumes silence is the absence of something. It is not. In the mind of someone who has been through real darkness, survived real betrayal, real loss, real spiritual warfare, silence is not empty. It is loaded. Think of it this way. A gun that has never been fired makes noise when you shake it. An empty magazine rattles. But a fully loaded weapon? It sits perfectly still, completely quiet. And that stillness is exactly what tells you this one is serious. Your silence works the same way. Psychologists who study high-conflict personalities have documented something remarkable. When an emotionally immature person encounters someone who refuses to react, who simply observes, who stays still, their anxiety does not decrease, it multiplies. Because reaction is the food of manipulation. When you react with anger, with tears, with defense, you confirm to the manipulator that their tactics have power. You give them data. You show them the door they can keep knocking on. But when you go silent, you starve them. And a person who has never learned to feed themselves emotionally, who has survived by feeding off the reactions of others, begins to unravel in the presence of your stillness. They start talking too much, over-explaining, getting louder while you get quieter, and everyone watching sees exactly who is in control. It was never them. It was always you. Your silence was never weakness. It was the most sophisticated psychological response available to a human being. It was loaded, and they felt every round. You stopped performing, and that terrified them. Here is something most people never realize about social dynamics. The majority of human interaction is performance. People perform confidence they don't feel. They perform happiness they haven't earned. They perform strength that collapses the moment the audience leaves. And when everyone around you is performing, they need you to perform too. Because performance only works when everyone agrees to participate in the theater. The moment one person stops acting, the entire illusion fractures. That is what you did. At some point in your life, through pain, through growth, through the long and quiet work of healing, you stopped performing. You stopped pretending to be unbothered when you were bothered. You stopped smiling when nothing was funny. You stopped shrinking yourself to make the insecure people around you feel tall. And that decision, that quiet internal decision to simply be real, broke something in the people around you. Because now the theater has a problem. There is one actor who has walked off the stage, who is sitting in the audience, who is watching the performance with clear, calm eyes. And performers cannot stand being watched by someone who isn't clapping. Clinical psychologists call this the authenticity threat. When a genuinely authentic person enters a social space dominated by performed personas, the performers experience measurable psychological discomfort, not because you attacked them, but because your realness makes their performance visible. They see themselves through your eyes, and they don't like what they see. That is not your burden to carry. That is their mirror to face. You stopped performing, and in doing so, you became the most honest and therefore the most powerful presence in every room you enter.
They tried to provoke you into their arena. You never showed up. Every conflict has a location, and the person who chooses the battlefield always has the advantage. This is not just military strategy. This is psychology. This is the hidden structure behind every argument, every manipulation, every attempt to destabilize you. When someone tries to provoke you, when they push and needle and whisper and attack, they are not just trying to hurt you, they are trying to relocate you. They want to move you from your arena, the arena of stillness, clarity, and higher thinking, into their arena. The arena of reaction, of ego, of noise. Because in their arena, they have home field advantage. They know every corner. They have been fighting there their whole life. And they know that the moment you step inside, you are playing their game by their rules. But you didn't show up. You received the invitation to chaos, and you sent it back, unopened. And that single act, the refusal to be relocated, communicated something to everyone watching that no speech, no argument, no retaliation ever could. It said, I am not available for this. Not I am afraid, not I have nothing to say, not I am weak. Simply, this arena is beneath me, and I know it, and now so do you. Psychiatrists who study emotional regulation describe this as arena selection, the conscious or unconscious choice about which emotional spaces you are willing to occupy. The most psychologically advanced individuals in any group are always identifiable by one trait above all others. They are extraordinarily selective about which battles they enter. Not because they cannot fight, but because they understand that some battles are not won by fighting, they are won by refusing to arrive. And when you didn't show up to their war, they had to fight themselves. And that is a war they cannot win. Your nervous system was rebuilt by fire. This is where science and spirit meet. When a person goes through prolonged stress, deep betrayal, chronic hardship, seasons of isolation and pain, something happens in the brain that researchers are only beginning to fully understand. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, the part that screams, danger, react, defend yourself, goes through a recalibration process. In people who never heal, the amygdala stays hypersensitive forever. Every small threat feels like a catastrophe. Every conflict triggers a full emergency response. They shout, they cry, they collapse, they lash out. Because their nervous system never learned the difference between a real fire and a lit match. But in people who survive and heal, people who walk through the fire and come out on the other side, something extraordinary happens. The nervous system recalibrates. It learns, it remembers, it develops what neuroscientists call stress inoculation, a measurably higher threshold for what triggers a full alarm response. In simple terms, what used to break you no longer moves you. Not because you became numb, but because your body and your mind have already been through the worst, and they know on a biological level that this current moment is survivable. That is why you can sit in rooms that would send other people into panic and feel almost nothing but calm. That is why you can hear words that would shatter most people and simply blink and breathe and continue. That is why people who try to destabilize you walk away confused, unsettled, feeling strangely like they just tried to knock down a wall with their bare hands. Your calm is not performance. It is not suppression. It is the reward of someone whose nervous system was rebuilt by fire into something that ordinary pressure simply cannot reach.
You learned that most noise is just fear wearing a costume. At some point, and you know exactly when this happened, you stopped hearing aggression as aggression. You started hearing it as fear. The person who shouts at you in a meeting is not powerful. They are terrified of being irrelevant. The family member who constantly criticizes you is not wise. They are afraid that your growth will expose how still they have been standing. The colleague who undermines you is not confident. They are desperate, because somewhere in their chest they know you are the real thing, and they are not. Loud people, aggressive people, controlling people, they are not operating from strength. They are operating from the most exhausting emotion a human being can carry: fear. And the moment you learned to see through the costume, the moment you stopped responding to the performance of aggression and started seeing the terrified child underneath it, everything changed. Because you cannot be controlled by something you have diagnosed. You cannot be manipulated by a trick you have already seen. And you cannot be destabilized by noise once you understand that noise is just silence that doesn't know itself yet. This is why you respond to screaming with stillness, to accusations with calm questions, to chaos with a quiet that unnerves everyone in the room. Not because you feel nothing, but because you see everything. You carry authority that was never given to you and cannot be taken away. There are two kinds of authority in this world. The first kind is assigned. It comes with a title, a position, a salary, a uniform, and the moment the title is removed, the authority evaporates with it. The second kind is embodied. It lives in the body, in the voice, in the eyes, in the way a person occupies space. It was not assigned by any human system, and it cannot be revoked by any human decision. You carry the second kind, and this is what confuses people in positions of assigned authority when they encounter you. They have the title, they have the office, they have the organizational chart that places them above you, and yet something in the room does not cooperate with the chart. When you speak, people listen, not because of your position, but because of the weight your words carry. When you go silent, people feel the silence, not as absence, but as presence. When you make a decision, the energy in the space shifts, not because you demanded it, but because something in you naturally anchors the room. Research in organizational psychology describes this as referent power, the rarest form of human influence, rooted not in position or reward or punishment, but in who a person is. It cannot be taught in a leadership course. It cannot be manufactured through confidence training. It is built slowly, painfully, through the long process of becoming so deeply acquainted with yourself that no external force can tell you who you are. And that process, it is exactly what you have been through. Every season of suffering that stripped away a false layer of you, every betrayal that taught you who you actually were underneath the performance, every moment of silence where you had no one to define you and had to define yourself. All of it was the construction of something no system can give you and no system can remove: your authority. It was never theirs to assign, and it will never be theirs to take. Your stillness forces others to confront their own chaos. A mirror does not argue with what it reflects. It simply shows the truth. And that is exactly what your stillness does to the people around you. When an emotionally chaotic person encounters someone who is genuinely still, not performed stillness, not suppressed emotions, but real, hard-earned, bone-deep calm, something uncomfortable happens inside them. The contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Your peace makes their chaos loud. Not because you said anything, not because you pointed a finger or made an accusation or even changed your expression, simply because the difference between what you are carrying and what they are carrying became visible, and the visibility was unbearable. Therapists who work with high-conflict personalities describe this phenomenon regularly. Clients will express intense hostility towards someone in their life who is by all accounts doing nothing provocative. They just sit there, the client will say. They're so calm, it makes me furious. And the therapist's response is always the same question. What do you think their calm reminds you of? Because that fury, it is not really about you. It is about the chaos inside them that your stillness has just made impossible to pretend isn't there. You are not provoking them. You are reflecting them. And people who have spent their whole lives running from their own reflection, who have survived by keeping enough noise and drama around them that the truth stays blurry, they cannot survive contact with someone who simply stands still and says without a word, "I see you, I see all of it, and I am not afraid of what I see." That is not aggression. That is the most powerful thing one human being can do to another.
You mastered the art of the response that ends wars. There's a response that ends arguments before they escalate, that diffuses manipulation before it gains traction, that communicates with total clarity and zero aggression that this conversation has reached its limit. It is not a clever comeback. It is not a devastating insult. It is not a long, articulate explanation of why the other person is wrong. It is simply nothing, or a single calm sentence, or a look. Most people spend their lives learning how to argue better, sharper words, faster responses, more devastating points. But the most psychologically advanced humans learn something different entirely. They learn that the most powerful response in most situations is the one that costs the other person more than it costs you. When you stay silent in the face of an accusation, your silence costs you nothing and costs them everything, because now they are standing in front of their own attack, which is bouncing back at them unabsorbed. When you respond to a shout with a quiet, measured sentence, you have just communicated that their volume has no effect on your clarity. And that single communication shifts the entire power dynamic of the interaction. When you walk away from a situation that was designed to humiliate you, and you walk away calmly, without drama, without a parting shot, you have just delivered the most humiliating response possible because you have communicated that the situation was not even worth your reaction. Researchers who study de-escalation techniques in hostage negotiation, the highest stakes communication environment that exists, consistently find one trait shared by the best negotiators in the world. They are extraordinarily comfortable with silence. They never rush to fill the space. They understand that whoever speaks first into an uncomfortable silence loses. And you have learned this. Not in a classroom, not from a book. You learned it from every moment you held your tongue when every nerve in your body was screaming to respond. You learned it from every battle you won by refusing to fight. And now it is so deeply wired into you that people feel it the moment you enter a room without you ever having to demonstrate it. They needed you to be predictable. You refused. Control requires prediction. To control someone, you must be able to anticipate them. You must know how they will respond to pressure, to praise, to exclusion, to threat. The moment a person becomes genuinely unpredictable, not chaotically unpredictable, but calmly,
quietly, sovereignly unpredictable. They become impossible to control. And that is exactly what you became. Not because you were erratic, not because you were unstable, but because the people who wanted to manage you eventually realized with growing unease that they could not model your behavior. They pushed and you didn't fall. They praised and you didn't chase. They excluded and you didn't beg. They threatened and you didn't shrink. Every lever of control that works on predictable people, fear, flattery, rejection, reward, you had quietly, systematically, almost unknowingly rendered useless. And the experience of losing all your levers on a person, of reaching for the controls and finding nothing there, is one of the most profoundly unsettling experiences a controlling person can have. Because the entire architecture of how they navigate the world is built on the assumption that people are manageable, and you just proved that assumption wrong. Psychologists call this locus of control, the internal compass that determines whether a person's choices are driven by external pressure or internal values. People with an external locus of control, the majority of people, shift based on what's around them. They are functionally manageable. People with a fully developed internal locus of control, people like you, move from the inside out. Their behavior is generated by internal values, not external pressure. And you cannot control someone who doesn't need anything from you. You are that person, and they know it, and it terrifies them in ways they will never fully be able to articulate. Your pain was the laboratory where your power was built. This is the point most people cannot accept, because it requires you to look at the worst seasons of your life and see them not as tragedy, but as curriculum. Every period of your life where you were forced into silence by circumstances, by loss, by the kind of loneliness that strips everything away and leaves you with nothing but yourself, was not punishment. It was a laboratory. And inside that laboratory, something was being built. The ability to sit with discomfort without running from it, built. The ability to read a room, read a person, read a situation with a clarity that other people don't have access to, built. The patience that allows you to wait while everyone around you panics, built. The stillness that makes you dangerous, built. None of these things can be taught. None of them can be bought. None of them can be inherited or downloaded from a course. They are only constructed through one method, living through hard things without losing yourself. And you did that. Over and over and over again, you did that. Neuroscientists who study post-traumatic growth, the measurable positive psychological changes that occur after surviving significant hardship, have identified something remarkable. People who survive and integrate their trauma don't just return to their previous level of functioning, they permanently surpass it. In areas of personal strength, relational depth, spiritual perception, and what researchers call existential clarity, the unshakable understanding of what actually matters, survivors consistently test higher than people who have never faced serious adversity. Your pain was not wasted. It was building the exact person standing in that room, the one who never raises their voice, because they no longer need to. You became fluent in a language most people never learn. There is a language spoken beneath every conversation, beneath the words, beneath the face, beneath even the body language that most people are trained to notice. It is the language of energy, of intention, of what a person is actually feeling versus what they are performing. Most people are illiterate in this language. They hear the words, they watch the face, and they take the performance at face value because they have no other tool. But you? At some point, and you know this is true, you developed the ability to feel what someone is actually communicating independent of what they are saying. You walk into a room, and within seconds you know where the tension is, who is pretending, who is in pain, who is dangerous, who is genuine. You sit across from someone, and while they're giving you a perfectly crafted explanation for something, you are quietly reading the thing beneath the explanation, the slight pause that lasts a half second too long, the word choice that doesn't quite match the emotion, the energy that doesn't align with the story. And you know. You don't always know how you know, you just know. Researchers who study this capacity describe it as somatic intelligence, the ability to gather and process social and emotional information through the body's sensory systems rather than just through the rational mind. It is measurably more accurate than purely cognitive analysis, and it is significantly more developed in people who have had to survive environments where surface communication could not be trusted, where reading beneath the words was not a skill, it was a survival requirement. Your life gave you that requirement, and you rose to meet it, which is why you now move through rooms with a perception that other people experience as almost supernatural. It is not supernatural. It is earned.
You have walked through this video, through 14 layers of truth, and perhaps for the first time, you are seeing clearly what you have actually built. Not through ease. Not through comfort. Not through a life that went the way you planned. But through fire. Through silence. Through the long, invisible, underestimated work of healing and becoming. The most dangerous person in the room never raises their voice, because they don't have to. Their nervous system has been rebuilt by experience. Their authority was forged, not assigned. Their stillness is not emptiness, it is precision. Their gentleness is not weakness, it is the calm of someone who knows exactly where their limit is and is not afraid of it. That is you. Not the loudest. Not the most aggressive. Not the most visible. But the one the room reorganizes around. The one they study because they can't explain. The one they remember, long after everyone else has been forgotten. Stand in that. Walk in that. And the next time someone mistakes your quiet for weakness, smile. Because they just made the most expensive mistake of their life.